you're new here, I'm Lena. Welcome to Flipping Gorgeous. I am in the process of renovating my forever home. I am doing as much of the work as myself as I can, and then I'm hiring some things out. So we just got brand new countertops, and I'm gonna be doing the backsplash. So I'm not an expert. I'm a stay-at-home mom of 3, and I'm just learning a lot along the way. So if you wanna hang out, let's do it. This is the tile I'm using. I will link it below. And now that we've got the countertops in, I have decided that I am going to take on tiling this backsplash, and hopefully I am getting it done before my son's big birthday party this weekend. I'm just crazy like that and want it all completed and finished and to show it off a little bit, if we're being honest. Before I get started with any type of tiling, I am doing prep work that will hopefully make everything go by a lot faster. I'm using this multi-tool to cut behind the intricate molding so that I don't have to make small little cuts in my tiles of indentions, but rather I can just slide the tile right behind it. And to be very honest with you, I'm a bit nervous that I'm going to have enough, and this tile I had to have shipped to me, so if we run out, it's gonna be a little bit challenging. So I'm just gonna be extra careful with making my cuts. And you might be wondering, how the heck am I doing this when I have 3 small kids? Well, my husband was really great, and he got all the kids out of the house for a few hours so that I could focus on this. It's funny because we have pretty traditional roles. I'm primarily a housewife. I do other things on the side, but I focus on the kids in the house. And when it comes to this, I'm usually the one doing the renovation project, and he's the one taking care of the kids. So we kind of laugh about that, but I love it, and this is my therapy, and he really respects that and acknowledges that I enjoy doing this stuff. So he's willing to pick up with the kids where it needs to be done and allow me to have time and focus on this. Again, I just wanted to take my time on this project because this is our forever home, and I've done some tiling projects in the past, and I've learned a lot as I've gone. They were definitely not perfect, but the number one thing I've learned is just to take my time, which is ironic because this is a little bit of a time crunch. But if I get it all done before the party, great. If I don't, that's fine too. I'm just applying it directly to the drywall. I'm using this pre-mixed thin set. This will adhere the tile to the wall. Some people have used things like muscle bound, which is this peel and stick, but I think for the long term, the thin set is the best thing to go with. You notice that I'm only using spacers on the bottom. I'm actually not using spacers in between the tiles. And you might think to yourself, but I thought you had to use spacers. Well, you don't, but if you want something super symmetrical, then you might. Actually, the edges of these tiles, because they are handmade, are not straight. And I want it to have almost this very natural look and a bit of an imperfection to give it a warmth, to give it a little bit of a old world feel. So I'm just using spacers in between the countertop and the bottom only. And now that I don't have to make a ton of cuts, I am just moving right along with applying these. Again, you could put the mastic on in a big space and then add them, but the likelihood of me getting interrupted is pretty high. So I just like to do one at a time so I don't have a bunch of dry on the wall and then I've come back 10 minutes later and I've got to scrape it off or it's not going to be flat. So again, I'm going one by one. Okay, it's about 9 p.m. and this is the progress I've made. Had to tend to the kids for a bit, so now they've gone to sleep and I am going to try to get as much of the tile as I can get done tonight. I think like a lot of moms who have crafts or projects or things around the house that they're trying to do, we often do them at night because that's when our kids are sleeping. And for me, I like to work on things when I know I'm not going to get interrupted. And even though that means sometimes I might stay up late and get tired, it feels much more relaxing to just do these things knowing that I'm not on a time crunch. And in this particular instance, I could not use my wet saw because it's about 10 o'clock at night and my neighbors would have hated me. So I was using this small, straight scoring tile cutter. I got this from Home Depot. It was less than $30. I'll link it below. I think it is something good to have in your arsenal, but it is a lot more difficult to cut the tiles than the wet saw. Because I was limited to using this, I didn't get as much done as I wanted to, but that's probably good because I needed to go to bed. But we did get underneath the range hood completed, which I feel good about. I worked on it for about, maybe 4 hours yesterday. I do a little bit in between when I have a break with the kids. My husband was helping me by getting them out of the house. And then I worked on it till about 11 p.m. last night, and I just reached a point where I couldn't do anything without my wet saw. I was using this little cut saw, and it just wasn't working that well. Sorry, I'm getting a phone call. So now I've got my wet saw because I'm gonna be cutting around the electrical outlets. So cutting around the electrical outlets is really the most time-consuming part, and I'm gonna show you how I do it. And then I'm gonna use my wet saw to cut everything down, because when you've gotta get kind of a corner cut, I think the wet saw is the only way to do it. So I realized that the video I thought I was taking of myself using the wet saw didn't actually record. So I will link my wet saw below. I ordered something off of Amazon that was less than $100. I think it is a great tool for a beginner. It's very easy to use. It's if you're doing a kitchen backsplash, if you're doing a small bathroom, it's definitely adequate enough. It's not super pro level, but those are hundreds of dollars. So again, if you're a stay-at-home mom like me who likes to do projects, but you don't want to invest a ton of money, I think it's a great option. And again, I will link everything that I use below in this video. So now that I'm on a little bit of a roll applying the tile, one thing that really helped me was making a lot of cuts beforehand. So really, I was able to use just tiles in a row and then about half of a tile on each edge. But again, you want to make sure that you're measuring, but doing those pre-cuts helped it go by so much faster. And that cabinet up at the top, I actually trimmed that using the multi-tool, so I could place the tile right behind it, slid it right behind it, versus figuring out how to cut that at an angle. So again, that saved me a lot of time.
Another night, I fall in your sight.
And again, the most time-consuming part was really cutting around the electrical outlets and my range hood. So I would measure, mark them, use my wet saw to make the cuts, and then just look to see if everything fit nicely before I applied the mastic and put it on. And this took me a while to learn, actually, guys. I mean, this was the hardest and most intimidating part of taking on a tiling project when you are not a professional. But the great thing is YouTube will teach you anything that you want to learn. So there are a lot of different approaches and techniques on how to cut around a electrical outlet, depending on what tools you have. And again, if you're using just square or rectangular tiles, it makes it a lot easier versus if you're using a mosaic. I tiled our butler's pantry using a mosaic pattern, and that got more complicated because I had to make sure that all the pattern lined up, especially when I was doing around the electrical outlets, that it looked continuous. So using just this plain tile made it much more easier to do. And again, if I can do this, you can do this. Just take your time, make your cuts, watch some videos, and I promise you've got this. The most precarious part of tiling this was getting up to the top of the ceiling. So if you can't tell, we have over 10-foot ceilings in this house. So I had to get on a high ladder and bend over these cabinets, but we got it done. I finally finished. I laid the last tile, and now it's time to grout. I would say this took me all in, just getting this tile, somewhere between 10 and 12 hours. I did it over a period of 3 days just because I have small kids, and so I would just work on it when I had the chance. So I'm saying all in for all of that, all the cuts, everything, 10 to 12 hours. And now it's time to put in the grout, and then it's gonna be done. If I'm being honest, I'm really proud of myself with this one. While I'm not making money outside of the house, if I can do things by myself and save us thousands of dollars, it feels so great. This little tool that I'm using is called a float, and you use it to apply grout, but you can also use it to push the tiles after you've put the mastic and put them on the wall to make sure that everything is nice and flat and even. At the time that I ordered the tile, I ordered the recommended grout of bright white. In my mind, I thought this was gonna help give it a seamless look, but as I started to apply it, the tile was just getting completely lost in the wall. Like I walked in from the end of the room and I couldn't even see it. So I stopped before I got too far. I didn't think that the most stressful part of all of this would be picking the grout color. So originally in my mind, I envisioned just like a very seamless look with white grout. You can't even tell there's tile there. I've made a couple different trips to floor and decor. It's so hard, like I can't pick the right one. So here's a little tip. If you're trying to test out grout, but you don't want to invest in a whole big thing, you can buy the small little grout caulking and you can put this in between and see how it looks. So I did one last night. I still don't think that was the right color. This was biscuit. So next to it, I'm gonna try a little bit darker. So I don't want it too dark. I want it to still blend, but I want it to give some definition. So we're gonna just test that out. Just a small test area is all we really need. So this one's still pretty light. I'm gonna do like half of this. So for an entire bag of non-grout, it said like 48 or 48 to 50 ounces. So I'm gonna do just a little less than a quarter of this gallon jug. Actually, this is the first time I've ever mixed grout. I usually do the pre-mixed grout, but it's sanded, and on this particular tile, the sand will ruin the finish. So we're going with the unsanded grout. So now it's time to mix. I think I finally found the right color, and it's Alabaster. This is the whole wall that I'm doing. Stops focusing on the house, and I'm focusing on, well, I mean, I'm focusing on the house, but a project. It's amazing how quickly the house just falls apart. Like laundry, toys everywhere. So now that I've got all the tile grouted, I'm going to let it sit for about 30 minutes, and then I will go back and wipe off all of the excess grout with a wet sponge, just going kind of in a circular motion. Again, using the unsanded grout because when I did this part, I didn't want to scratch it all up. So I just dipped my sponge in water and went over everything, scrubbing with the more abrasive edge to get off the excess and then flipping it over. Okay, it came down to the wire. The birthday party is tomorrow, but I've got it in a place where it's good enough to go. I'm really proud of how it turned out. If I can do it, you can do it. My biggest advice is just take your time. Watch YouTube videos beforehand like me, like anybody else on there, and I promise you will come out with a beautiful result. Here's what I came up with. I'm in love with it. It's not perfect. Again, I need to touch it up in a few places, but the tile is everything I'd hoped for. And again, changing that grout made such a difference. And even though it took a couple tries, we got it right. I think with the Alabaster, it gave it just enough contrast that I wanted to pop of the tile, but it wasn't overwhelming and farmhousey. And I think what I love most about this tile, again, I've got to touch some stuff up, these crevices, touch up my range hood, but what I love most about the tile is the texture. It gives it this very warm, like not just a plain subway tile, but gives it kind of that warmth feel, a little bit of the European style farmhouse that I'm going for. So I love this tile. Again, it's from Tile Bar. I'll link it below. And I think just it turned out so nice with the countertops. So now the next thing is that I've got the tile done. Should I add a piece of wood to my range hood? You can go watch my other video where I show you what I was going to do with that. Now that I've put in this tile, the trim in the house is looking very yellow to me. So I'm going to paint all that trim cover over here. I've got a few color swatches. I did taupe, but I actually don't like any of these. So here's what I'm thinking. I might paint this the same color as the range hood, but maybe on the inside, do a darker color like a black or one of these taupes to give it a little more dimension. Tell me in the comments below what you think the kitchen needs, because it needs a little something. Right now, the white is all getting lost. So again, thanks for watching. And if you want to keep up with all my home renovations, consider subscribing.